Hi, I think we're live with Facebook Live on our Moontalk series. Um, okay, let me just wait for some people to join in. I'm not sure if you're able to hear me, if you're able to see me. So just while we're waiting for everybody to join in, we're just doing a sound check and a video check. Please do let your friends and family know that we're live. Um, and join in with our conversation and our discussion today on what are healthy periods. Uh, because we want to open up the entire discussion of the menstrual cycle. Why should we have it all stigmatized? So before I start, just let me know if there's any problems with the audio, with the video, if there's anything that technically that's not working out for you. I just want to give a couple of minutes for everybody to join in. So this is going to be our Moontalk series, where we're opening up the discussion and the forum to openly and healthily talking about the menstrual cycle and any and all issues that are related to the entire reproductive system of women. Just waiting for some people to join in. If you join in, please let us know you're on. Say hi to us. Let us know how the video and audio feedback is. If something's not clear, if the microphone's giving you any issues, if I'm not audible, or if the video is very patchy. So the things that we wanted to discuss this week with our Moontalk series over the next several weeks that we will be doing a lot of things. Hi Nitya, I've see that you've just joined in. Nitya, could you just let me know on the chat if I'm visible, if the video is fine, if I'm audible, if there's any technical issues that you're facing that I can get corrected. We're just waiting for a couple of people to join in and we'll get started. So because this video is going to be recorded and played later on as well, um, I was just referring to how we're opening up the entire discussion on the menstrual cycle and busting that stigma about opening up, about talking about it with friends, with family, with professionals. Because somewhere we've just been launched into this entire sea of womanhood and not given a raft, not given a user's manual. And it's not something new that cropped up one day, right? It's something that all women have been having for thousands of years. So we should ideally know everything that there is to know. We should ideally be able to talk about it. We should know what is normal. We should know what is healthy when it comes to your menstrual cycle. And everybody has their own set of what is normal. And your normal could be different from your friend's normal. It could be different from your mother's normal. Does that mean it's unhealthy? Absolutely not. But are there signs that do talk about what is a healthy menstrual cycle and what is unhealthy menstrual cycle? Yes, there are signs and symptoms that you should be watching out for. And if you are not meeting any of those signs, or if something seems to be irregular, please do consult a professional. And what we also wanted to open up with this forum is that there seems to be a lot of dependence today on medications, on perhaps going to the extent of surgery, where people remove the entire uterus, or um, and the hormonal imbalance is one physical aspect, but nobody really understands the emotional and the mental aspects that go along with the entire reproductive system. And this is something, as human beings and as women, we have to understand that everything in our system is tied in, everything works in symbiosis. And to say that one part of my body is not working out doesn't have an impact on my emotions, doesn't have an impact on my mental balance, is frankly hui. Right? It's not true. And women tend to be a lot more in touch with their emotions, primarily because we are so hormonally driven. And it's the truth. And it's not something to be stigmatized, not something that is weakness. Yes, to some extent, you do feel that you don't have as much control over your body, but rest assured, it's not like men have any more control over their bodies. So the only thing that we're looking at is if our body is communicating with us on a constant basis, why shouldn't we join in on that conversation? Why should we remain silent? Um, so over the next several weeks, we're going to be starting out with a lot of questionnaires, a lot of videos and discussions with professionals, with experts. We would love to hear from you about what are your experiences, what are your friends or family's experiences when it comes to the menstrual cycle. What was your first experience like? What is your experience like right now? How do you feel throughout the month? We look at the menstrual cycle and think it's only about those couple 4 7 days maybe that you bleed, and then after that it's all over and done with. It's not. And that's what I also wanted to discuss with you today. What happens during the rest of the month? Why is it tied into the moon? Why do we call it a moon cycle? um, what should we really be looking at? Why is it that in ancient cultures it was considered sacred, that women were considered sacred, that the women's reproductive system was considered sacred? And if something went wrong with it, that means something was wrong with society itself. So please do join us over the next several weeks, where we are going to be having a lot of different fun activities for you. There's a lot of information that we want to share with everybody, and we want everybody to share with us as well about what are your experiences. Are there any signs of irregularities? Do you even know what those irregularities are? Has somebody told you that something is normal? Do you have anybody that you discuss this with at all on a regular basis? Are there people who have told you your cycle is not normal, when then you consider you consulted a practitioner and they said, no, that's actually normal for you? Or if there's somebody that told you, deal with it, um, pain, deal with it, constant bleeding, deal with it. You don't have to deal with it. That's one of the things that also that we are going to keep discussing over the next few weeks. What are the treatment options available? Do we only have to rely on allopathic medications? uh, what should we really be looking at in terms of nutrition, in terms of exercise, in terms of lifestyle changes? And if these aren't working out, what should we be looking at for alternative therapies in terms of energy healing, hypnotherapy? Do they work? How do they work? What is it that we as individuals can do? And more importantly, what can we as the community do to help support other women, so that even if our cycles are healthy, what is it that we are doing that is so good for us and so healthy for us and so nourishing for us that other women can then therefore adopt? Because let's face it, today we have no support communities, um, whether it's in our family, whether it's online. And that's something that we really would like to encourage in today's day and age with the entire information explosion. So I know there's a lot of information out there on the menstrual cycle, and you may have read it, you may have had sex ed classes in school or in college, but we wanted to start our Moontalk series and opening up the discussion on the menstrual cycle with very basically considering what is a healthy cycle. Okay, so there is a questionnaire that has been floating on the Heal Clinic Facebook page. Very short questionnaire. It has only 5 very basic questions. Ideally, you should be tracking your entire cycle. And I'm not just talking about tracking the 5-day or the 7-day cycle where you're actually bleeding, but you should also be tracking so many other aspects that I will start to mention, and then we can have a discussion about what it is that you experience, and what is it that I experience, and what is it that clients of ours have experienced. So please do write in while this discussion is on. What have your experiences with the menstrual cycle been? Is there anything concerning you? Is there anything that you feel is healthy and you would like to share with us? so that we can share it with the rest of the community and let them know that there are people out there who have regular normal lives and that is also possible for them. So please do answer that questionnaire. Look at those basic 5 questions that I will also be discussing in this live discussion of ours today. They will help you get some sense. It's not precise. And there are only 5 variables. There are multiple variables that you should be considering when it comes to your cycle and understanding whether it's healthy or normal. But they will give you a very basic sense of if these 5 variables have some inconsistencies and irregularities, then you could either be on the borderline of some menstrual ailments that, or it could be seriously unhealthy and you should be considering consulting a practitioner, a professional. You can consult us at Heal Clinic. You can go to an allopathic doctor. You can go to an Ayurvedic doctor. It's completely your call. It's not that we want to have any sort of a sales marketing video out for you. This is more of a discussion because we're genuinely concerned about menstrual health and reproductive health and women's health. And we would really like for you to know within yourself that you be comfortable within your own skin and that you have the confidence that if something goes wrong, I know I can take care of it and I want to take care of my body. So let us know what your results are post the questionnaire, those 5 questions that you answer. Are you healthy? Are you borderline? Is it looking like it's unhealthy? Other things that you want to discuss with us. You don't have to take up any of the treatment options that we offer, but join in the conversation and let us know how those questions are treating you. So to start out with, just before the questionnaire is to identify the fact that you won't be able to answer the questionnaire and unless you are tracking your cycles. So we will also be coming out with how do you track these cycles. There are several apps that are available on your smartphone and on your laptops that help track your entire monthly cycle from one month to the other. So basically what happens with the menstrual cycle, right? Let's start with sex ed class in school. I like to look at how beautifully the menstrual cycle of women meshes with the phases of the moon, because this is something that I have personally started to notice with my cycles after I worked on them quite a lot and brought them back into some sort of a healthy balance. So ideally what happens is when the phases of the moon are waxing, right? So when you're approaching the full moon, from the ovaries and one egg is released through the fallopian tube into your uterus in preparation for, the body is assuming that a baby is going to be formed. So along with that, what should happen is that your uterine wall, the uterus blood vessels, all of those start to thicken and more blood starts to flow into the uterus because it's preparing the entire womb. It's preparing everything hormonally, all the chemicals, all the nutrition that it would be required ideally if a baby were to be conceived, right? Now nobody conceives every month, but that's how the evolution decided that human bodies should work, or at least women's bodies should work, so that we don't have a mating season and we're able to mate whenever we feel like. Otherwise, if what happens is if we conceive and the uterus is not fully ready, then there could be umpteen complications. So this is the body's way of ensuring that one, the womb is physically ready, two, there is a lot of blood flowing into it. You may all of this is controlled now through hormones. So it is also possible during the waxing of the moon that you start to feel different kinds of emotions and different kinds of moods and behaviors that come across for you. Usually what happens is when you have the waxing moon, this is not always, and I speak this from personal experience, all things being equal in your external environment and in your internal mental and emotional makeup, ideal situation, you should start to feel a burst of energy. You should start to feel a lot of creativity, because creativity also comes from that source, right? So a chakra A practitioner will tell you that that is where your sacral chakra is, and that rules creativity. Of the many things that it also rules, so you may start to feel a lot of energy flowing through you. You may start to feel you can do anything. You may start to feel a lot of new ideas that start coming to you, and you want to start taking action around those, which ties in very well with the fact that your womb is expanding and creating, and it is trying to birth new life. So imagine if we are using all of these emotions, all of these creativity, all of these happy chemicals that are now moving in the system, all the estrogen and the progesterone that's moving in the system, in a balance that is allowing us to birth something new into the world. So one way of working with these, all of these energies and all of these processes in the system, is to actually do something creative in the external world, whether that's creative only for you, like a hobby, or that is creative um, in your workspace, or some aesthetics that you want to improve. That's completely up to you. It's not necessary that every time you go through the waxing moon you feel awesome, because let's face it, life is complicated and messy. um, Sometimes you may feel a burst of energy that comes during those 15 days of the waxing moon. Sometimes it could be that you feel very reflective, and you don't want to be around the world, and you just want to be with yourself. So here what I'm stressing is, pay attention to what is your own cycle within yourself. What are your emotional cycles? What are your mental cycles? What are your energy cycles? Maybe along with the moon, it may not be precisely how the moon works. Why is that? Because a menstrual cycle can be anywhere between 21 to 35 days, where the moon's cycle is very consistent at 30 days. Right? So it doesn't have to be very specific. It's just a guideline for you to understand. And even if it's not in line with, you notice today is Purnima, today is Amavasya, and it's not in line with that, it's still fine. Maybe it's just your way and your body's way of understanding what is normal. Right? So don't get too attached to it, but you should also notice how your cycles are working. It's just something to be aware of. So again, moving back to the ideal situation. Now, at the full moon, your body is filled with all the happy hormones, and you may feel bloated. You may start to feel that there is a lot of heaviness in your lower abdominal region, because that's when the womb technically is supposed to be at its thickest and all the blood is flowing over there. So when the waning moon starts, that's when you may start to notice a few PMS syndrome or PMS symptoms. Now, when I say few, I mean few, okay? Because ideally PMS shouldn't, again, ideal situation, you shouldn't have any sort of PMS symptoms unless it's like 3 or 4 days before you actually start spotting and bleeding. Okay, but you may start to notice that your energies slowly start to wane. Again, it's not necessary. Every month, how your emotions shift can be completely different, because we are living lives, and it's not wrong. So 1 month you may feel down when it comes to the waxing moon, and awesome when it comes to the waning moon, and the next month it could be the reverse. That's perfectly normal. The only thing that you should really be watching out for is, are you paying attention to how you're feeling, and are you giving yourself enough room to allow those feelings to come forth, and to bring them forth in a healthy manner and a healthy way of expressing them in the world through your actions. So ideally, again, or technically, what can happen during the waning phase of the moon is that you may start to feel more reflective. You may not feel as social. You may want to feel solitude, or you may start to have mood swings. You may get triggered very easily, because where estrogen has been moving in your system all this while and giving you all of that beautiful feminine energy and a lot of energy to do things, with the waning moon a lot of progesterone comes in. I'm assuming these hormones are right. I'm not a doctor, so don't take my word for it. This is just some things that I have read and understood. So during the waning phase of the moon, it's like the at one end the body becomes very tense because the uterus feels and the egg feels, oh no, the egg is going to die because conception has not happened. So I want to make that happen. Body is a little weird like that. So you could feel, that's one of the reasons why, because all the hormones are changing and the body is all tensed up, you may start to take out a lot of that frustration through your emotions, through your actions, through your behavior. Again, the point is not to make yourself wrong about it, but to notice whether you're able to give healthy expression to those emotions. And if you're feeling that those emotions are pretty strong, give yourself time and space to get away from people. Because what can happen during any time of this, because our entire bodies are ruled by the moon's cycles a lot more than they are for men. It's not that male bodies are not ruled by the moon, they are, and they have their own cycles. For us it's more pronounced because the entire reproductive system is based completely around the moon. All our hormones are based completely around the moon. So what can happen is that if you're not paying attention to your moods, you're not paying attention to your stress levels, you're not paying attention to how you feel within the body. Because if you're feeling bloated, you're feeling uncomfortable, your diet requirements are shifting, and if you're not paying attention to that, they can lead into further complications. Minimum complication that can really root your make your world turn upside down are mood swings and behavioral changes. That doesn't mean that you are emotional and women are emotional. It means that we need to be aware of where are these emotions coming from and what is a healthy way of expressing them. That doesn't mean you shouldn't express your emotions, and your emotions may be completely valid, right? So it is very essential to validate your emotions to yourself. So what happens is, all things being equal again, your spotting and bleeding may happen anytime plus or minus 7 days of the new moon in an ideal situation. Even if it doesn't conform with the new moon, it's fine. It may be your version of normal. Just notice when that happens, when during the moon cycle it happens. So anytime plus or minus 7 days of the new moon, you may start to spot, and then you may start to bleed normally and have your bleeding cycle of the entire menstrual cycle. So from one closure, okay, so let's say from one closure during the new moon of your bleeding stopping to the next time that your bleeding starts up, that cycle needs to be tracked. Ideally, a healthy cycle is anywhere between 21 to 35 days. If it is less than 21 days or if it is more than 35 days, if you are constantly spotting during the month, if you are constantly bleeding throughout the month, these are irregularities that you should be watching out for, and you should consult a practitioner, a professional at this point in time, because it is very essential that you should not be bleeding all throughout the month, and you should ideally have a very defined start date and an end date and no spotting in between. Maybe 1 or 2 light spotting during the month, maybe you're normal, but you should still get it checked, because you could have uterine leakages or any sort of issues with the circulatory system, because the entire body tends to be very fragile and it needs proper taking care of. The more that you're able to take care of it and the more that you're aware of it, it will add so much more vitality and strength to you. So don't be a victim of your body, take charge. Now during the new moon, okay, we're just taking an ideal situation. It's not like even my cycles are completely on the date the new moon is, oh, today's Amavasya and my body just starts bleeding, okay. So plus or minus 7 days, anytime that it can happen. I just keep a track of it. Now your entire cycle from the time that you start spotting to the time that it peaks and you start bleeding completely, and then again it peters down, and then you start spotting, and then it stops. All of that ideally should be anywhere between 4 to 7 days. 3 days is still borderline. Anything more than 7 days is very concerning. Anything 2 days, we have seen that they tend to be normal cycles, but if it is less than 4 days and anything more than 7 days, please do consult a professional, because it's not exactly normal. So you just need to get it checked whether yours is continues to be healthy in spite of the fact that the number of days are different. Okay. Any If you're having 10-day cycles, it is a borderline issue, and you should ideally get that tested. um, so what happens during the new moon is that your body is filled with hormones that are telling the system the entire uterine wall that we have built up over the last few weeks has to be shed, because we are going through an entire rebirth cycle. So there has to be a shedding of the uterine wall. All the blood vessels that have got bigger and thicker because they were pushing all that nutrition into the womb in preparation for conception, all of that excess blood, it's not bad blood, it is extremely good blood, because it carries all the nutrition that a womb requires, right? So all of this blood cannot be held in the body anymore. It needs to be released so that a new cycle can be started, and there can be a rebirth of the entire reproductive system, and we can invite the new egg in. So the egg is shed because it did not there was no conception. The uterine wall is shed, and all the excess blood that has flowed into the uterus and the womb, all of that is shed. That is the exact bleeding process. Um, in ancient cultures, what they used to do was that they used to collect all of this blood, because they have a lot of properties of that we are considering now in terms of stem cells, that we are seeing now in terms of nutrition. And even when that blood was poured into the soil actually got enriched. So don't for 1 second think that all of that blood that you're leaking out of your system or cramping out of your system is bad in any way, or has any sort of stigma attached to it. Oh, the video just went a little bit black. Anyway, so while that comes up, um, this is extremely healthy blood. And today there are a lot of ways in which people are coming out with menstrual cups and ways of collecting all of that menstrual blood, so that instead of putting it in a pad or a tampon and throwing it away, this is blood that is actually useful and can be stored and can be used for stem cell research and can be used for cell regeneration and whatnot. Science is finding out a lot of things. So for now, let's just keep it simple. You're using a pad, that's fine. Okay, one day as awareness builds and menstrual cups and all of that start to become more mainstream, then we'll start to talk about that a little more, and how do we keep that in our systems on a daily basis. So what happens during this bleeding cycle? It's not an open wound. You're not just it's not like you got a scratch and it's just bleeding. Your body is actively pushing and squeezing all of that blood and the uterine wall and all of that out of your system. That's what cramping is. That's why there is a pain in that area. The next thing that you should be watching out for is how painful it is. Certain amount of feeling that squeeze and feeling that cramping is normal. That's why we head towards chocolate, because it releases endorphins in the system and it's a natural painkiller. But if you are using medication to control the pain levels, there is somewhere that something may have gone wrong with the system, because ideally you should not be having very high pain levels. There have been instances where women's appendices have burst, and they just thought that they were in the middle of their menstrual cycle because that was how painful their normal cycle is. Now, again, pay attention. Everybody has a different normal, and your pain levels may be higher than somebody else's, and that may be normal for you. But ideally, you should not be having any excess pain that you cannot handle. All you should be feeling is a cramping and a pushing out of all of those cells in the blood. Um, so during this 4 to 7 day cycle, the way that the entire cycle again ideally should be moving is that you start spotting. So the color of the blood can be anywhere from pink to light red at the time of spotting, and that's fine at this end of the cycle. Then as it moves, you should be able to see physically and feel an increase in the blood flow that is pouring out, right? The color should become red, normal blood red, ideally. Also pay attention to how heavy the bleeding is, what is the consistency of the blood, because it should have blood like consistency. So when you bleed, there is a slight thickness to blood, it's not as watery. So while your cycle is peaking and during the peak of that 4 to 7 day cycle of your bleeding, please do make sure that you pay attention to, is it too watery? Do you need to change your pads very often? Very often meaning every 1 to 2 hours. Is it too thick? Is the color anything other than red? These are the signs that you should be watching out for. Then again, when your cycle starts petering down, again the blood flow should start reducing. You should start to feel a little bit better. Sometimes what can happen is your moods can go up and down because a lot of hormones are moving around in the system. So just pay attention to all of that, and if you feel like resting and your body needs rest. Now everybody works differently. Some bodies need rest while this process is happening. Some bodies are just fine going about their everyday. Some bodies need less exercise during this. Some bodies are fine doing the same amount of exercise. The point is to pay attention to every month, how do you feel? Because every month it can differ a little bit. So allow yourself a little bit of a range, but make sure that range is not too large. I understand that there are a lot of things that we do need to pay attention to. That doesn't mean that you turn into some sort of an overcautious mouse. But first few months that you need to start paying attention to them, it starts to become very normal and natural habit for you, maybe 3 or 4 months down the line. So when your cycle is now petering off, again, the blood flow should start reducing. The color, once it is towards the tail end of your bleeding cycle, can start to turn a little bit brown, maybe a little bit black. You have to keep a watch on that. Black is still not good. So you do pay attention to it. Don't just wrap up your pad and throw it away. Pay attention to what color it is. If you when you bleed when you're taking a bath, when you bleed when you're in the loo, make sure that you're paying attention to the color, to the consistency, to the thickness, and to how you feel during the entire process. So ideally, during the first 1 or 2 days is where you should be feeling the intense amount of pain, or the intense as in relatively to the rest of your cycle, not as in very intense pain. And as your bleeding starts going down, technically speaking, you shouldn't have any more cramping, but then the body can feel, I want to push out all the rest of the remaining blood, so you may have a little more cramping towards the last, 4th day, 5th day. Pay attention. Any changes in color, like I said, any changes in consistency. Now you may have some amount of spotting few days before the actual bleeding starts, that may still be fine. But if let's say if you have spotting on day 15 or during the full moon cycle, that if you're looking at the moon cycles, Again, these are things that you really need to be watching out for. Technically, you shouldn't be having any sort of spotting at that point in time, because that's when the womb is getting ready for conception and for holding a baby. So if you're bleeding at those points in time, something can be wrong. It's not necessary that it is wrong. So the cycles that we've talked about, from when you finally finish bleeding, right? Last spotting is finished. From then to the next time that you start bleeding, anywhere between 21 to 35 days as a cycle is tends to be healthy and normal. If it's anything less or anything more, keep a track of that. Second, your bleeding cycle should be anywhere between 4 to 7 days. If it's less or more, or if you're constantly bleeding, that's a big red flag, right? Look at consistency, look at your cramping and pain levels, look at mood changes, behavior changes. Also look at how often you're changing your pads, because you should ideally be changing it every 5 to 7 hours. And even if it's not full in 7 hours, please do change it. This is a hygiene factor. You don't want germs and infections and whatnot. It's a very fragile area of the reproductive system and of your entire body. So even if you're towards the beginning of your bleeding cycle or towards the end of the cycle, you should still be changing your pads maximum every 7 hours. Don't keep it anything longer than that. So this is ideally what is considered a healthy menstrual cycle. Please do let us know what are your cycles, what are your experiences, what are your pain levels on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rate them? Maybe yours is normal and perfectly healthy, so there may be nothing to worry about, but you won't know unless you start discussing that with the rest of the community. So invite your friends, invite your family, let us know what it is that their experiences have been like. Have there been any instances in your friend circle, in your family circle, where they have had reproductive issues or infections, PCOD, endometriosis, or undiagnosed issues with their entire menstrual cycle, with their uterus, with their ovaries? Are there fibroids, cysts? Has there been constant bleeding? Has there been no bleeding and the bleeding is only controlled due to medications? Any of these are all irregularities. Now, for the rest of the Moontalk series, we will be taking you through what are the irregularities, what causes them, what are the signs that you should be looking for that something is very wrong with your system, because here we're just talking about what are healthy periods as the first video series. And we will also be talking about what are the treatment options that are available. It's not just allopathic medication, it is not just surgery. There have been very consistent cases that we have seen over the years that have been helped through yoga, through Ayurveda, through nutrition, through even energy healing, through hypnotherapy, sometimes even past life regressions. And we will be discussing all of these different treatment options. What are they? How do they work? What are the different successes that we have had? What are the different cases that we have dealt with? A lot of different practitioners and professionals will be discussing this with you over the next several weeks. And we will be sharing with you tips and tricks that you can do to nourish your body on a daily basis. Because like I've been saying, everything runs with the moon's cycle. And even if it's not perfectly in line with the full moon and the new moon, you still have your own connection to what happens along with the phases of the moon. So we will also be coming out with a tracking calendar and how you can track your entire cycle month on month, not just how you're bleeding, but what else is happening during the rest of the month, so that you get a holistic and a whole full picture of what is happening in your body, what is happening in your emotions, what is happening behaviorally for you, and what is it that you can do on a daily basis to nourish your system. What is your body communicating with you through the different ways that it has bleeding, that it has colors, that it has pain, and what can you do about it? Because we've just talked about very simply the uterus and what happens with it. Now, you could have body pains, you may have sickness, you may have fatigue, and we haven't yet got to that. And this is why we want to open up the entire forum on talking about the menstrual cycle, not just in terms of bleeding, but also in terms of what happens throughout the entire moon. So, moon talk. Um, and get this community started so that everybody feels supported. And you should know that you don't have to suffer in silence. You don't have to rely completely on medications. We're not saying stop your medications, but you can complement and supplement all of those medicines that you're putting into your system um, through nourishment, through communicating with your system, through identifying what are your stress levels and how can you manage those and how can you reduce that. So we will also be talking about emotional balance, mental balance, the rest of the physical body and what happens to it and how you should be managing it through the rest of the next few weeks. If there are any questions, comments, your experiences, please do comment with us. This forum is completely open, not just right now, but for the overall next month at least. So we would love to hear from you. What is your feedback? What are your experiences? If you want to keep it anonymous, say a friend of mine had this. Do get your friends and family involved, get your colleagues involved. Start this conversation offline with colleagues, with your corporation. Because if your workspace is not discussing all of this, they should be. Women form a very large percentage of the workspace, and we do need to be supported as human beings. Um, so let us know. We'd love to hear from you. This is an open community. We're opening this up only to have conversation and discussions. This is not a one-way thing. I'm just waiting for any sort of questions or comments, concerns that anybody would like to share. Please do chat that in. I'm just keeping this Facebook Live open for the next couple of minutes. If there are any questions, comments, any concerns, any experiences that you would like to share, um, that we can discuss. Like I said, we'll be coming out every day with new exercises, new things to look out for, things that you can start implementing in your life without any hassles at all. So anything that you would like to share, Nitya, Deepti, if there's anything that you would like to for me to complete within this Facebook Live session, if there's anything else that you would like to mention for all our viewers and listeners. So like I said, this is an open forum. We want to discuss everything from what is healthy for the body to what is not healthy for the body and what can you do about it. And this is not just because we want to be doing sales and marketing for you, but because we want to open up that community and we want to bust any of the stigma that is surrounding women's bodies. Right? It took a lot of courage for a lot of us to even start saying the word menstruation, bleeding, that time of the month. It's not Voldemort, right? We don't have to treat it like he who must not be named. These are women's bodies that we are talking about. These are our bodies that we are talking about, and we should honor them and nourish them and nurture them. And when we do that, bodies are phenomenal supports for living full, healthy lives that are filled with vitality and filled with creativity. And the things that we are capable of as a community, as individuals, as women, is something that we have not even scratched the surface of. Okay, so if there are no further questions and comments or anything that you would like me to cover during this session, I know it's been 45 minutes. I think we were planning for 30 minutes. Please do let us know anytime during the day, night, rest of the weeks. Someone is asking, if for 3 days the flow is heavy, but then it stops, is that healthy? So that may be your normal. So you may have very defined start date, end date, a very tight bleeding cycle where you have it peak very quickly and end very quickly, and that's the end of it. that may be perfectly normal, that may be perfectly healthy for you. So it's not just one symptom or one sign that you need to be looking out for, you need to be considering all the variables put together. So for example, during that 3-day cycle, like I said, 4 to 7 days is fine, 3 days is still borderline, is still okay. Just make sure what is the color, what is the consistency, how often are you changing, and what is your hygiene routine, what are your pain levels specifically, are you feeling any sort of extra fatigue. Certain amount of fatigue is normal because life blood is flowing from you, right? So fatigue is normal. Are you nourishing your body? Is there nutrition that is going in? That is the main key that you should be looking out for when you're actually bleeding. So make sure that you're having a lot of water, a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables, nutritious food that's actually going into the system. This is very key. If your nutrition levels are fine, 3 days, just by that one variable of 3 days, it may be completely normal. Look at all the other variables as well. There's another question: is there any specific diet you need to follow during periods? Yeah, so that's just what I've been talking about. Make sure that your nutrition levels just before, normally when you start bleeding, through when you're bleeding, and just after you start bleeding, make sure that the nutrition levels are uh, paid attention to. It's not that you shouldn't have comfort food and junk food. You may have a craving for junk food. I know I do. Sometimes once a month, sometimes during the full moon peak, or sometimes while I'm bleeding, all I want is junk food, and that's fine if you have a craving for it. If you want to have chips and kurkure and just binge on chocolates. Aside to that, water is a key. Electrolytes are key because you're losing blood, and you're losing more blood than if you were actually donating blood for blood donation drives. So you're losing a lot more, and this is, like I said, it is filled with nourishment and nutrition for the womb, which means your nourishment and nutrition is being depleted while you're bleeding. So make sure that your nutrition values, your carbohydrates, your uh, vitamins and minerals are essential at this point in time. You may want to cut down on protein because your body may not be able to process proteins. It may like, for example, if you're non-vegetarian, it may like fish. I wouldn't suggest any kind of healthy foods because your entire uterus is putting a lot of pressure on your bladder, on your intestines, on the entire digestive system, and you don't want your kidneys and liver to be affected by very heavy foods or very rich foods. Keep it as clean as possible. Any blood detox that your system wants through food, through using good vitamins, minerals, sprouts, like I said, fruits and vegetables. You don't want anything that's adding heat, so no papayas. Um, Even if you're having chocolate, that's a lot of heat, so make sure that you're controlling the heat levels. So foods that have a lot of heat in them, cut down on them. Then again, you don't want the extreme of too many cool things because your body is in the flux. But as long as your nutritional values are same, so you're getting your carbohydrate requirements, you're getting your vitamin and mineral requirements, don't turn into some sort of an overcautious mouse. um, that's it. Pay attention to your water intake as well, and if your water quality is not good, water is another way that the blood flushes a lot of the excess hormones out of the system, because you've built a lot of hormones during the uh, period prior to where you're prior to the bleeding, where your uterus was building all of the uterine wall and everything. So make sure that the quality of your water is good. If it's not, you don't want to have too many chemicals in your water, you don't want to have plastic in your water. So make sure that either you're using stainless steel containers to store your water, or you're using copper or a surai or a mud pot, or whatever it is that you are comfortable with, because these are the things that can start affecting the electromagnetic vibrations of your system. um, Maybe we should, we will be having nutritionists who will be talking about what you should be eating, what you should not be eating. very categorically. I'm just giving a very overall sense of it. Good to have foods that are water rich as well. So cucumbers, watermelons tend to also be good because they have a good nutritional value. Tender coconut water, they tend to have good nutritional value, and they flush out a lot of the toxins and help you feel better. Carbohydrates are essential for the and starch is essential for the very fact that because your muscles are contracting in the uterus, you need to be filled with enough energy to supply that contraction and cramping, as well as to supply the rest of your body to function on a daily basis. That's why you may have fatigue. So ensure that your carbohydrate levels, your starch levels, you're having good, let's say, wheat or millets. Not that your body is getting heavy with it, but enough to manage. I'm just giving you a very overall picture. We'll have people who will talk about this very specifically, and we'll have entire weeks that are dedicated towards food, entire weeks that are dedicated towards exercises that you can and cannot, should or should not be doing during the entire month, which basically means entire life, because month to month we keep living. Okay, so I think that's about all that I wanted to share for today. So the next onwards, we will be looking at what have your experiences been for what have your experiences been when you first started your menstrual cycle, when you first, as they say, officially became a woman, as if you weren't a woman before you were. Any experiences that you have during the menstrual cycle, let's say you're heading towards menopause. What are the various things that happen within the body, within the mind, within emotions? Let us know. Share your feedback, share your um, experiences, share other people's experiences, and keep it anonymous if you feel like it. Join our discussion. Thank you so much for being a part of our Facebook Live today. We've been almost 50 minutes today. Thank you so much for staying with us. We will be putting up recordings of this video on the Facebook Heal Clinic page, and having a lot more fun exercises and activities for you, and opening up a complete discussion on the women's cycle, just to create that community and that support system all for you. So thank you so much for being with us today. Have a great day.